Thank you for stopping by my poster. I'm going to be talking to you about an experiment I've been running over the past few years in which we tried to explore what emotion regulation strategy usage looks like beyond the lab. Within the context of the lab, it's a pretty well-established relationship between the affective intensity of an experience and which strategies people tend to be more likely to choose. That is to say that as affective intensity of an experience increases, people tend to be more likely to use disengagement strategies like distraction or suppression. And as affective intensity decreases, they can be more likely to use engagement strategies like reappraisal. As I said, this relationship is pretty well established within the field, but it's not often that we've been able to explore emotion regulation strategy usage beyond the lab. There's a lot of reasons why these might not line up. In the context of the lab, we often train individuals on what strategies they can use, and the general population is more strategy naive. It is also the case that in the real world, emotion regulation is unprompted. When somebody cuts you off in traffic, there's not often somebody around to tell you to calm yourself down. And there's a lot of other complications. It might be the case that while the effect is large within the context of the lab, when we have a lot of other things that are affecting our cognitive load, the relationship is not as predictable. So that being said, we ran 2 experiments. One in 2019 in which we recruited 54 people to go through a haunted house. We used Eastern State Penitentiary here in Philadelphia because it has a very good reputation. It tend to be very consistent night after night. It's probably the closest we can get to exerting control over an environment without actually being in a lab. So participants went through the haunted house experience. They did know that it was going to be a haunted house beforehand, but they did not know that it was an emotion regulation study. So afterwards, we asked them to self-identify 10 emotionally salient events that they experienced during that haunted house, describe the event, describe what emotions they'd experienced during that event, plus how intense those emotions were, and then describe how they attempted to regulate those emotions if they did try to regulate them. We then had hypothesis blind raters go through those and then code them as either reappraisal, distraction, some combination of those two, or none of the above. We wound up having, I think, something like 540 events. And of those, we found 88 events from 34 participants that used either reappraisal or distraction, not both and not neither. Of those 88 events, you can see that the breakdown was not even. So reappraisal was far less common than distraction. It was only about a quarter of the events that we found, relative to about 75% people reported distraction. So from there, we took those events and then we fed them to people who did not experience the haunted house. So these were forecasters. We had them read the description of the event, the emotions experienced, and how intense those emotions were. And then we trained them in distraction and reappraisal. And we asked them, if you were in this situation, what do you think you would have used? We had 158 participants after exclusions that we recruited through Qualtrics, and they responded to all 88 scenarios. When we look at whether or not there's a relationship, we did not find any relationship between affective intensity and which strategy people used within experiencers. So people who actually went through the haunted house, the affective intensity did not predict whether they were more likely to use reappraisal or distraction. But when we look at forecasters, we do see a small effect. So as affective intensity increased, I'm sorry, I have this wrong. Oh yeah, no, that is right. Sorry, as affective intensity increases, people are more likely to use distraction than they are reappraisal. We use mixed binary effect regression for this. And we find that participant was a significant predictor based on ICC. And to wrap it up, because there's not much time left, our results do suggest that there might be a discrepancy between affective regulation forecasting and affective regulation action. This relationship did hold up, controlling for a number of variables, including gender, age, depression, and ERQ scores, or the propensity with which somebody would choose an emotion regulation strategy. There are a number of limitations here, including self-selection, a limited experiencer sample and sample size. We only looked at 2 emotion regulation strategies. There's still the 500, 400 some events that don't fit the categories that we talked about. But we did run a haunted house study in 2021 to follow up on this, where we addressed a number of these limitations. So yeah, thank you. Please let me know if you have any questions.